Great question.
My parents moved to the UK. Their degrees were worthless. They came here as dishwashers on that salary, but even so, I was still sent to private education from the moment that I was born. Saved up enough money to open their own smaller restaurant, and this was Stephen Hawking. He came to our restaurant a few times a year. You know, he knew my mum, like, kind of on a somewhat personal level. I just remember being, like, kind of in awe of Stephen Hawking. There's even a dish named after him. Until year 12, I was very much against applying to Oxbridge.
That's a great question.
When I was smaller, I'd always say, like, oh yeah, I don't owe my parents anything. Very wrongly. My name used to be Zijia, legally, and now it's been legally changed to Austin. People would never be able to pronounce my name properly. I was always kind of on the chubbier side. A lot of my self-confidence when I was younger was kind of impacted by my weight. I was kind of scared to speak out or anything. Wow, now that's a great question.
This might sound really weird, but
that is a really tough question. So I used to be really atheist. Everything can be explained by physics and science. And nowadays, I'm a lot more on the fence. I guess I doubt myself, thinking like, am I good enough to do this? We'll have to see. I feel as though growing up, I definitely suppressed a lot of that. Thank you so much for having me, David.
Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my podcast, Coffees on Me, David Quan, where I strive to give guests legacy-worthy interviews that listeners can enjoy while cooking, commuting, relaxing, or walking their pets. It's still the bank holiday weekend, a particularly reflective one for me in quite a low point, I think, in life, but I'm sure I'll be fine. But it's particularly nice to call some friends and today have a call with a very, very inspiring soon-to-be Oxford fresher who I'm really excited to welcome here in London. And we're recording it outside, and it's 8 p.m. On a Monday, which is the bank holiday, but it's getting dark, so I'm really looking forward to this recording, and hopefully the guest is enjoying his latte. In the grand scheme of things, feel very blessed that we're now approaching 100,000 podcast downloads. Please know that I don't take any of your time, feedback, and support for granted, because when I started this Passion Project podcast at a low point of my time in Cambridge, I was genuinely motivated by 3 founding ideals. Number 1, purpose of giving. Number 2, learning from others. And number 3, sharing of stories. These aspirations still make up the content description for every single episode. Indeed, the opportunities to strive to give my courageous and insightful guests legacy-worthy interviews over coffee, tea, bubble tea or water, despite my many inadequacies, have been a tremendous privilege that imbues me with gratitude. I know that I will listen and look back at how naive I am. But if you have been during the discussions on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts, thank you. And please do consider leaving a review and nominating a guest by contacting me via my Linktree, David Quan. Seeing this podcast on people's Spotify Wraps or receiving positive messages about the guests give me tremendous fulfillment. I cannot thank all my wonderful guests enough for their courage and insights. And I genuinely maintain the deep conviction that this passion project, if wholly true to those founding motivations about giving, learning and sharing, is a worthwhile pursuit. Which gives me great pleasure to introduce my incredibly hardworking, inspiring and important guest. Austin Wang, formerly known as Zijia, is about to enter his first year studying economics and management at St Hilda's College, University of Oxford. Having been brought up by first-generation Chinese immigrants, he has navigated growing up in 2 different worlds, one at home and one being at a British highly selective independent school. His father and mother both had very few opportunities growing up, although this didn't stop his father from getting a master's degree in engineering, having grown up in mainland China during the Mao era, and were determined to give him opportunities that they weren't given as a child, with him being in private education since he was born, even whilst his parents worked as dishwashers on minimum wage. His parents have had a huge impact on his upbringing and on the person he has become today, and he feels as though he owes much of his current and future success to the way that they have brought him up until today. His passions generally revolve around sports and music, having played rugby for a professional team's developing player program, which is Northampton Saints, competing in multiple national hockey finals and founding a football team during his time in high school. He finds comfort in anything outdoors. His parents also convinced him to take up the violin and piano, something he is eternally grateful for. Again, highlighting the disparity between worlds that he grew up in. For him, balancing commitments such as these alongside his dedication to the academics were particularly difficult, especially in his younger years, with him currently trying to maintain the balance, especially as he goes from a teenager to a young man. Austin, thank you so much for making the trip down from Cambridge to London. And I just really, as I said, I'm probably having a particularly humbling and probably a difficult weekend, but it's just nice to see you. So welcome to my podcast, Coffee Sunday, David Quan.
Thank you so much, David. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you today.
Firstly, massive congratulations on getting into Oxford. That's a massive achievement. How do you feel, and how did you celebrate that?
Thank you so much. First of all, I feel just kind of firstly honoured to have the opportunity to study at such a prestigious institution, and kind of like just. I guess I want to, thank and appreciate everyone that kind of helped me along my journey, including my parents, my teachers, my friends, even, got me through the 2 years of sixth form, which wasn't an easy time for me, I have to say. In terms of celebration, I'm currently in my summer holidays, having just gotten my A-level results back, and I'm somewhat taking it easy, having some time off, playing some sport and seeing the outdoors, which is some stuff I really didn't get up to as much in my upper sixth year because of A-levels and exams.
So you're living at Cambridge, but you applied to Oxford. Why did you want both?
Great question. I think part of it was, first of all, the more honest response is my mathematics wasn't kind of standard for Cambridge. That might be, good for you to hear, since I applied for economics. And also another thing was I've been in Cambridge since I was 5. And I feel as though another 3 years would take it to what's that, 16 years in Cambridge. I think that's probably a bit too long for anyone. Yeah, if we're being completely honest.
So I guess I'm really quite inspired by the gratitude that you have for like your parents and the sacrifices that they've made. Do you mind maybe just giving some context on like family background and how you're in Cambridge and kind of your parents being immigrants? I think there's always something particularly inspiring there that would have no doubt inspired or motivated you growing up.
No, I mean I completely agree. Yeah, my parents grew up in like a region of China called Shenyang. It's in the northeast of China, somewhat near the North Korean border, and neither my father or my mother were relatively kind of rich growing up. They didn't really have, their families weren't very high income, but they worked hard in school, as many first generation immigrants do, and they were really hardworking, and they got themselves an education. But when my parents moved to the UK to kind of provide me with a better education, they soon came to terms with the fact that their degrees were worthless. My dad studied for years to get an engineering master's, while my mother, I think she was actually an economics graduate. And she worked in a bank for a while, and she had a decent life, decent salary. But the issue was that I think they realized that if you look at the landscape of Chinese education, it would simply be really difficult, almost impossible for me to kind of achieve a lot. So I guess they decided to move over to the UK and had me, and that's why I'm eternally grateful to them, because they gave up all the things they had worked hard for, such as their degrees, their qualifications, just so I could have a better upbringing.
Wow, that's incredible. And was it easy for them to move from China to UK, like logistically or financially?
I mean, financially, definitely not. I mean, I have early memories of a house we had in Birmingham. So we moved from China to Birmingham. I was born in Birmingham, and I distinctly remember it was a modest house. It was quite small. Kind of the area was kind of prone to robbery and some crime, but I mean, I don't remember much of this since I was so young, but my parents sometimes talk to me about it, and I think it kind of highlights the fact that, well, when they came here, they were, as you mentioned before, they came here as dishwashers, and I guess it's very difficult for them to kind of earn a good living on that salary, but even so, I was still sent to private education from the moment that I was born, so yeah.
How did they meet?
Wow. I've asked them this many times. I'm pretty sure they met at uni, to be honest. I'm like 99% sure they met at uni, or they lived in similar regions. So I think it's something to do with either high school or university that led them to meet.
Yeah. And then since when they married, how much longer did it take to have you?
Oh,
Because I'm just trying to put together the puzzle that you were born in Birmingham.
so my mum and dad had me when they were about 40, so kind of getting older, and they got married in their mid-20s, so about 15 years between
Wow.
them marrying and then having me, and they moved to the UK in the
Okay.
year 99.
So
I think.
what were they doing in China before having you?
So my dad was actually working at a chemical engineering company, because that's he got his degree and then he moved straight into chemical engineering.
Yeah.
And my mum, quite fittingly for having an economics degree, was working at a bank at the time. So yeah.
Okay, that's wonderful. And often immigrants coming to a new country, you got to adjust to, a new culture, new language. And it's not always easy at that age to pick up something completely new and to lose your entire community and social network, and always wonder what life could have been like if you stayed and continued that momentum. And I was just wondering, have you asked them much about their initial periods of moving and what that was like?
I've talked to them about this a lot, actually. They always say it was just really difficult because you lose all your support networks, right? So you lose your friends, you lose your family. As you said, you're in an unfamiliar culture as well. So all that help that you would have kind of received previously from said friends, said family, it's not there anymore.
And at that point, social media wouldn't have been
Exactly,
very
yeah. So
active.
you can't Google. They can't Google their solutions to everything. So I think there's a lot of trial and error on their part, to be completely honest.
Yeah. And are there, so my family moved from China to Australia as well, and I'm sure my dad wouldn't mind this, and I don't think he'll mind because he won't be listening, because he would struggle with the English understanding. But that's the point. He still is not the best at English, but he has figured out a way to communicate the message, even though his language skills of English aren't necessarily at a native level. And I was wondering, did your parents maybe adapt a lot better, and are they native speakers now?
Absolutely. My parents' English is still limited, to say the least. My dad's is slightly better, but my mum's is really rudimentary. I think the important thing for them was more building up those kind of support structures again, because even though my mum may not be kind of as integrated into kind of English life as maybe some other people are, she still has support communities of fellow kind of Chinese people who may be first generation immigrants, may have lived here their entire lives, but still it's about finding those connections. Yeah.
Okay, so they all had degrees, so they at that point in China, if you had a degree, it was actually quite significant. It's a remarkable social kind of signifier that you can work hard and you're able to produce, and then come to the UK, as you said, having to do dishwashing, which again, we're not here to judge which profession or which job is better or worse, but how do they find the transition from being in higher education, say working in a bank, and then completely changing into dishwashing?
No, of course, yeah. I know. I completely get what you mean, because it's kind of it's. I guess for them it was more of a case of they were preparing more for the future, because although it was definitely a sacrifice in the short term, I think they could see that in terms of life in China, kind of late 20th century versus life here, it's just kind of in terms of in China, the whole education is a lot more competitive. Getting into top schools is a lot more harder. It's a lot more of a numbers game, right? Whereas in the UK, it's just a lot less competitive. There's a lot less strain on people, and I think they didn't want me to go through what they had to go through to get their degrees, if that makes sense.
So they worked really, really hard.
Exactly, because even though I think I have an okay work ethic, I don't think it's anything compared to what they had when they were growing up. And that's, I think they moved here disregarding anything, for example their degrees becoming less worthwhile, or not being able to use them here, to instead kind of think about what would happen to me in the future.
Wow.
Instead.
Wow. All before you were born.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no.
That's really cool. So when they were doing dishwasher, because I know that they aren't doing that now, so they started dishwashing, and then what next? how did they pivot from Birmingham to Cambridge and founding the business, etc.?
So I think initially, as I said, they were working in the back of a restaurant, and they eventually, over a couple of years, saved up enough money to open their own smaller restaurant, and this was now in Coventry. So I've moved twice in my life, once from Birmingham to Coventry, then to Cambridge. So they owned a small restaurant in Coventry after having moved from Birmingham, having saved up kind of the funds to start that business. So that was their route from.
Wow, so they're quite entrepreneurial.
Yeah, definitely so. Entrepreneurial and hardworking, yeah, for sure.
But the restaurant business is always an interesting one, because I think the hospitality industry is a lot of interactions with people, leaving good impressions, and just that attention to detail in everything that you do. And I was wondering, when you were growing up, as they were working there, did you maybe get any exposure into the hospitality industry? Did you help them out with the restaurant, or did you just go for the food?
I mean, I definitely went for the food, that's for sure. But I do think that one thing that actually did really come out of that restaurant business was, I think it really developed my people skills, because although I was really young at the time, all I can remember is I would always just have random conversations with patrons. I have no idea who they were. They have no idea who I was. And I'd kind of be, the stereotypical kid doing his homework, on the table. But I'd start a conversation with people on the table next to me. And I guess perhaps that's where I developed my people skills from.
That's what I thought, because, last night I was at a restaurant, and then the kid was there, and we were just having, a conversation. And I was just like, wow, how many kids would this, or how many people would this child be having? And at such a young age, he won't obviously remember who I am, but it kind of all becomes a part of it. And it's quite cool that you've also had that experience. Was there a particular encounter or interaction that you've had with anyone, a stranger who you perhaps can't even name, but what they said or how they appeared just made an impression on you?
I mean, I remember one particular one, which was this is one that you probably have heard of at some point. So when my parents, this was in Cambridge now, during the time we owned a Chinese restaurant kind of in the centre of town. And there was one man in particular he came to our restaurant a few times a year, every year. So Stephen Hawking was quite he came to our restaurant quite often, and he became he knew my mum kind of on a somewhat personal level. And I remember always just seeing him and thinking wow, this guy, I just remember being kind of in awe about him, because he's had hardships in his life, but he's still he was Stephen Hawking, and I remember really just being in awe. And there's even a dish named after him actually, which is Stephen Hawking vinegar potatoes,
Wow.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
He always ordered the same dish, so we named it after him eventually.
Wow. That's really, really cool. So at that point then, you were in that, so I think you moved to Cambridge when you were 5. So, I mean, me at 5 definitely weren't thinking about universities and where I want to go or what I want to study, but did Cambridge, being a particular university town, did that infiltrate your thinking, perhaps?
I mean, definitely. I think my parents deliberately chose to move to Cambridge, to be to have their son surrounded by all these, intellectual people, all these, the people realistically at the top of their field, right? And I think, it definitely had an impact on me, because the people who, I was sat at dinner with my parents, who my parents were close with, because owning a restaurant, my mum got to know lots of people within Cambridge, working at the universities. And therefore, I definitely think so, because I ended up having conversations with people from, all different kind of backgrounds or different kind of skill sets, and I think it kind of pushed me to, I guess, work harder.
What kind of kid were you? Were you popular? Did you you've obviously accomplished a lot academically, you've obviously done a lot of sport, but being Asian male kid, I did my dissertation on kind of this, so I'm particularly interested in your experiences growing up as an Asian male in a Western context.
I think, first of all, I was actually really fortunate with the school I went to, because the school I went to is really, really good for inclusivity.
Is that
The Perth School
yeah.
in Cambridge. Yeah, it was really
A few
good.
of my
for
friends went there too.
Really?
Yeah.
It was really good for inclusivity, and especially during my younger years, I wasn't really academically orientated. I was like most 7-year-olds. All I did was kind of play sport and play video games, to be completely honest. So I mean, growing up, I never really had like any kind of issues with my race at school. It was a good I had a good school experience in my younger years, to be honest.
Yeah. So you felt accepted and
absolutely in school. Yeah, most of the time when absolutely.
Okay. And was language at all an issue, or being born there you just felt it was natural?
English was my first language. The issue was more at home with speaking Mandarin, to be completely
Okay. Oh, that's wonderful. So you were at the Perth from the beginning?
From year 1, yeah.
Wow.
I was there from year 1 through to year 13, so 12 years.
Wow.
12 years, so 13 years at the same school, yeah.
And with the same cohort of people?
Same cohort of people, have friends now, which I knew back then.
What's it like being, I guess, in a private school from the very beginning? Intentionally broad question.
Yeah, very broad. I guess there are a few quirks that kind of stand out to me to begin with. I mean, like, first of all, for example, in the prep, everyone, this seems like a small thing, but now thinking it was kind of weird, everyone played a musical instrument, and just stuff like that. It's stuff like that you would never find at
you just think it's normal.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I kind of feel I was very naive, kind of maybe a few years after I left the prep, because I was like, I thought everyone played a musical instrument. I thought that was normal, because I hadn't been exposed. But then I realised that I was in a position, where I was very privileged to have that opportunity to play an instrument. But I guess it's stuff like that. You kind of live behind like a veil of ignorance, and like you sometimes, especially when you're younger, you're very impressionable, right? I feel as though when I was younger, I definitely lived behind that veil and didn't realise like kind of what other people went through, or like had the opportunities that other people were given, I might say.
And you were saying how, like in the bio, for example, that despite the hardships that your parents have faced, they've clearly invested everything they had financially, emotionally into you and into your education, and sending you to a private school, which obviously has a higher fee than compared to perhaps other schools. Were you ever aware of the financial sacrifices that they have had to make, or at what point do you think you started thinking, wow, like this does cost money and this isn't just anything?
I remember the day quite distinctively, actually. It was during COVID. I think I was year 10, so that's 3 years ago now. And I remember my dad like jokingly saying to me, like, mentioning something about, your school bill is due today. Your school bill is due today, right? And he jokingly said it, and it was completely kind of like, he didn't mean it in any way. He meant it harmlessly. I did a quick like mental calculation of how much kind of my education would cost them. I was like, wow, that is a ridiculous number. Like, just over these many years, this is how much they put. I was like, that is, like, when you're, year 9, think about, like, in my head, I was like, probably thinking what that could buy me, but like thinking kind of
how many PlayStations.
Yeah, exactly. So probably something along those lines. So I was really like shocked, and kind of was like, wow, like that is really just an astronomical sum of money.
There's quite a generalization with class, and I when we were walking here, you were mentioning how you were listening to the previous podcast episode guest Sophie talking about her family going from middle class to working class, and you were saying, you feel like your family had gone through the opposite of going from working to middle. At that point in year 10, did that idea of class or social stratification at all cross your mind, and what did it mean for you?
I mean, I think especially I have lots of friends who, like, let's say, may not go to private schools, right? And I think from a really kind of early on, maybe year 7, year 8, I think I'd already realised that to have the opportunity to go to an independent school, I was very kind of, that wasn't like a normal experience, if that makes sense. So I was very much aware of it. Perhaps I didn't kind of always think about like the consequences until like maybe later on, but I was definitely always acutely aware that I was lucky. I was in a lucky position, which lots of people wouldn't have had access to when they were growing up. So.
Yeah. Okay, and at what point did Mum open this Oxbridge tutoring kind of service business?
It's been It's been a few years now. I think it was some point during, I want to say it was some point during COVID, to be honest, but I couldn't place one in the particular year.
Did it, I'm just thinking, at that point you were obviously studying for university and mum opened this Oxbridge admissions service. How ironic would it be if her son did not get into Oxbridge? Did that at all cross your mind? I mean, oh wow, now I need to.
believe it or not, until year 12, I was very much against applying to Oxbridge. I was completely against it. I was like, there's no way I'm doing it. I said to my parents multiple times, much to their kind of dismay. They clearly weren't happy with it, but they were like, it's my life, I can make my choice. But yeah, up until probably the summer of year 12, so that's exactly a year ago now, I was completely against, like actively, I'm not applying, not just like it wasn't in my mind at all. I mean, personally, I really didn't want kind of to be I didn't want all the kind of pressure and stress of going through it, to be honest, I thought. Because especially, I mean, I'm sure you kind of have been exposed to like the Asian community in terms of like university acceptances and university kind of the process of application. And it was just something that I didn't really want to get myself into, because I was like, I kind of thought to myself, I don't want to see myself become someone who's like, fixated on this stuff. I don't want to like let my university define me. And I don't really know. I was kind of like, I didn't really like kind of the sometimes, not always obviously, but oftentimes there's kind of elitism to do with, let's say, Oxbridge, especially amongst like kind of the British Asian community, in my experience. I mean, this is obviously not true across the board, but in my experience, I've definitely seen kind of elitism and people looking down upon other people who don't attend these, and I'd hate to do that, or like act even knowingly or unknowingly.
So your school is quite, good at pushing people towards Oxbridge. Your parents, obviously, having put so much, in whatever sense it is, for you to have the very best education. And again, I'm not here to say that Oxbridge is necessarily better than other, but I think it's fair to say that on average, Oxbridge in the UK is seen, just like the Ivy League in the US is seen, as the pinnacle of education. Whether that's true is up for debate, but the perception of it is. Do you feel like you were actively against it and didn't want to be sucked in because you were also hearing it so much from both your school and your parents, that it was that teenage rebellion of, well, I just want to make my own decision, I want to forge my own path?
No, absolutely.
So you were still ambitious, but you just didn't want, you wanted to get it your way.
Yeah. It wasn't like I didn't want to kind of go to, get an education or like kind of work hard in my exams. It was more of a case just like, I want to, as you said, forge my own path, do my own thing and work it out for myself, instead of having, kind of this stuff spoon-fed to me in a sense, and like kind of being told this is the right way or this is the wrong way. And I just didn't want to be pushed in that manner by either my school or my parents. So
okay. What changed then?
That's a great question. I mean, I think a part of it was definitely kind of just realizing that, as you said earlier, by no means does anything mean that Oxbridge is like, the best or not, but kind of if we look numbers wise, kind of, let's say stuff like salaries, career prospects may be better in a lot of courses at Oxbridge. I mean, that's undeniable. But I think a lot of it was kind of realizing that to give back, when I was smaller, I'd always say like, oh yeah, I don't owe my parents anything. Very wrongly, by the way. I'd always kind of think that to myself. I would always be like, I don't owe them anything. It was their choice to have me. And then I think at a certain point I was like, that's just not true. I was like, I owe them everything. So I think that working hard and like, maybe getting into a uni with better on paper career prospects would be, the best way to kind of repay them. I mean, give back to them.
Okay. And was it hard to, I guess, we all find it difficult of being wrong and, or our pride, right? And I think for me this weekend as well, it's accepting that I have made bad decisions and I have misjudge things or miscalculated things, and as a consequence I have had to change my mind on things and consider things differently, and it's easier said than done. And I was wondering if you were so actively against it, did it just kind of was it hard emotionally to then go, hey, actually you might have a point there?
No, yeah, it was not embarrassing is not the right word. It was humbling, to say the least. Yeah, I had to look my parents in the eye and be like, you know what, I agree with you. You told me so, and you know what, fair enough. Fair enough on their part. What you say does make sense. So yeah, it was.
Which I think is something that Oxford, when you get there, will have more of those experiences. They're very humbling, where I think part of like the intellectual humility means that you're going to feel something and argue something so strongly, but you're going to expose yourself, hopefully, to different perspectives and different people, and eventually you will face a choice of, that you might be wrong, or at least they have got more of a point than you initially see it, and do we put down our pride and do we lower our heads and really accept it, or do we just continue our own path thinking that we've got it all? So I think it's really cool that you've already had that kind of pivotal experience of realizing that, hey, it's okay that I thought something so strongly, but now I can change my mind. And
exactly that, yeah.
Okay, so at that point, was your grades good?
I mean, to be honest, not really. GCSE year, my grades were good, but that's only because I did them during COVID. If I had done them during a non-COVID year, they would have been abysmal, because in my year we got given teacher assessed grades, so I didn't have to sit any exams. We sat the teachers created exams and then gave us a predicted grade based on them. Obviously, if your school is going to do them, they're going to be very inflated. I absolutely did not deserve those grades at that point in time, if I'm being completely honest. Absolutely not. Wow. I was very lazy. I wasn't hardworking. I was not very kind of academically sound at GCSEs. So that's in the UK, that's year 11.
So when you got it, was there partially guilt, partially haha, no, I'm so happy I've got it?
It was more a sense of relief, because I think definitely more of a relief, because I went into a lot of those exams knowing that this could go really badly. And when I saw those, I didn't feel much pride from them. I didn't feel much pride. I got my A-levels back kind of, a few weeks ago now, and I don't think I felt much more proud of many things in my life. Whereas my GCSE results were kind of a similar caliber. I just didn't feel any kind of happiness about them. I was kind of more like, okay, they're here now, but you haven't earned them. So yeah, definitely.
Okay, that's really interesting. And at that point, you were doing a lot of sport. I mean, you quite high level. I mean, multiple sports.
Yeah, I guess that was part of partly I grew up amongst a lot of people who are very kind of sports minded. I was very close friends, and still am, with a lot of people who are very, very incredibly sports minded. And I just did sport from a really young age, and I played a lot of sport, especially during that point, kind of before sixth form, kind of when you were doing your GCSEs. I did a lot of sport.
Yeah, well, sport's massive, and for me, basketball and just the discipline, the teamwork, the experiences that I got there were very character shaping, to say the least, as cliche as it sounds. What was your sporting journey like? Where did you start, and how did you, at each of the sports, like rugby, hockey, what levels did you get to, and how did you get there?
So in terms of my first experience as a sport, I think my dad really wanted me to do sport. I think part of the reason was so that I could fit in. So as mentioned before, my name used to be Zijia, legally, and now it's been legally changed to Austin. I think.
Oh wow, it was a legal change.
It's a legal change. Yeah, it's not just a nickname. On my passport, my middle name is now Zijia, and my first name is now Austin. Whereas in the past it was Zijia Wang, and Austin wasn't my name. But I think part of the reason was because, for example, I would go to sports tournaments and they couldn't pronounce my name properly. So my dad was he just wanted me to fit in, I think. So I now have Austin as an English name, which was legally changed.
Wow.
My dad, I guess sport is actually mostly to do with my dad, because he he really pushed it when I was younger. Like, I did everything. I did ballet at one point, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, that seems like a world away now. And yeah, I mean, I played some sports at a decently high level, albeit when I was younger, because in the sixth form I just didn't have the time. But yeah, I played in the Saints Developing Player program, which is quite interesting because I didn't actually like get a spot on the trial, but my coach was like, just turn up on the day, and then I ended up, getting selected for it, which is kind of just, I don't understand how. Yeah. And then hockey, the school I go to is pretty kind of up there in the UK for hockey, so I've competed at kind of a few national finals with the school. And then the last of which is obviously the founding of the football team. That's one of my favourites, actually. So in the summer after my GCSEs, I was with some friends, and one of them was like, wouldn't it be cool if we started a football team? Because at Perth, kind of, there's no football because it's independent schools, and a lot of the independent schools in the UK play rugby during the winter instead of football. So I was already playing for a team, so I called someone who was on kind of the board of directors for the league and got a school team set up, and then we played for a year during my lower sixth year in a local league, and yeah, it was brilliant, to be honest.
Wow. We'll go back to sport, but I find the name change particularly interesting because at that point you were already kind of socializing with your Chinese name and everything. And how old were you when that name got changed legally?
It was pretty young. I think about 5 or 6. I want to say.
It was still not that young. Like,
it
would have still been a part of it. Other people would have known you as that.
Yeah. Lots of people knew me as Zijia when I was younger. Yeah.
Okay, and before that, did you realize it was almost a barrier that you were a little different, or?
It was. I think I was too young to realize that it was a barrier. It was just always, like, my only distinctive memory of it is, as I meant, like, at tournaments, the people would never be able to pronounce my name properly. They'd always stand there kind of stuttering over their words, or like not being able to pronounce the letters properly. And I kind of thought it was funny when I was younger, which I probably shouldn't, but I think I was just a bit like, it's just a part of life. My name's just difficult to pronounce, I guess. And yeah.
Wow. Okay. And for Dad to make that decision, was it a discussion with you? I know you were very young, but was it easy for you to...
In all honesty, I have no memory of this discussion. All I know is that
it got changed.
One day they magically started calling me Austin on the forms, and I was like, wow.
But like, did Dad tell you, hey, from now on, tell friends that you're Austin?
I honestly do not remember.
Oh,
it was
okay.
So long ago.
It's really, I think name and identity is obviously particularly important because, I mean, just intuitively, right, when you first read someone's name, you haven't yet seen the person, you know nothing about them, but we do subconsciously form impressions of them, and Austin is very different to Zijia.
Exactly.
And for me, in Australia, I've always gone with David, but obviously my Chinese name, Quan丁文, and I think partially was, you're in a Anglophone kind of Western context, and I just always kind of grew up with David, but I think a year and a half ago, added, as you would have seen on my social media and even for the podcast, I've always tried to make an effort to add my Chinese name, because I feel like it is a really core, important part of me that represents so much of my values, my thinking process, my pride and my family and my culture, that both the Chinese and English make up me, and just using English or just using Chinese just didn't capture me enough. And I was wondering, what does the English or Chinese name mean to you, if anything?
I mean, I think between the two, the Chinese one definitely has more meaning, because whenever I go back kind of to visit family, I'm always referred to as that Chinese name, Wang Zijia. And that to me is really like, I think I definitely didn't appreciate it enough when I was younger, because I always used to dread going back to China. I was like during the summer, I was always like, I don't want to be here. Like, my social medias are blocked. I can't talk to friends. Yeah, it's like stupid things like that. But I think nowadays I'm very much like more accepting of it, and I'm like not even accepting. Like, I'm proud of my kind of Chinese background. I used to tell people that I was just English, and now I tell people no, I'm a British-born Chinese, as I am. But I think that Zijia kind of represents almost to me what, as you mentioned earlier, what could have been if I had grown up in China, like what my life could have become. Because I'm Austin over here, but you know, I'm Zijia back home or back in China, as you mentioned.
Okay, that's fascinating, and yeah, I'm particularly, I guess, interested by our perceptions of ourselves and other people's perception of us, which obviously guides our confidence, our self-esteem, about fitting in, about acceptance, and all those core fundamental themes that I think each of us will kind of grapple with throughout our lives. Did you being quite sporty then, would it be right to assume that you were always like fit, strong, muscular, just really just good build, and you know?
Absolutely not. I mean, I was always, growing up, I was always kind of on the chubbier side. Like my diet consisted of, you know, kind of oily Chinese restaurant food, a lot of sweet and sour chicken, a lot of like, you know, stuff which probably wasn't the best for me. I didn't really know kind of what was good for me growing up, but I was always kind of chubby. But then during COVID, it took a turn for the worse, because if we think, like, I always used to eat a lot, but I also did a lot of sport, which kind of compensated. So I was just kind of like slightly chubby, but nothing kind of dangerous. But then during COVID, my activity level dropped, you know, off a cliff. I stopped running, stopped going to exercise, stopped playing sport, but my intake remained the same. So yeah, I really I gained a lot of weight during COVID, and it took me about probably a year or so to kind of lose it all, and that really shaped a lot of like my personality. I really think so. I think that was a really big thing in my life, like a lot of it. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's so interesting. So at that point, was the restaurant food just a matter of convenience, or did your parents think that the restaurant obviously could offer a great variety and breadth of food?
I think it's more of a case of my parents don't really, and they never really knew, like, you know, what was good for me. They kind of, as I said, trial and error. And they were like, they didn't really think about stuff like, oh, is that good for him? Is that bad for him? I mean, they would encourage me to eat as healthy as possible, but I think I didn't really take that advice more on board. Like, less so that it wasn't their fault by any means. I think it was more me just being naive and being like, oh, you know, this unhealthy food tastes nice, but not really kind of considering the consequences of it. So yeah, it wasn't.
Did you often invite friends to the restaurant?
Oh yeah, a lot, still to this day, to the takeaway. But yeah, so friends would often come, we'd often eat. It was, good memories.
Yeah. Did mum and dad give you a commission?
Yeah, I wish.
So, I hadn't completely realised in the UK the kind of private school, public school debate. I think in Australia, 40% of schools are like private schools, so it's not particularly antagonistic. It's not, you know, particularly heated, and not always on the word, on the mouth. And maybe I'm biased being the UK in an environment like Cambridge with humanities. Maybe that's more of a discussion. But did you ever question private school education, independent school education in particular, associated with the fees, on whether it's so-called worth it?
I think it's worth it, but only if you're a very specific type of person. And what I mean by that is, I've kind of had this, I have this debate with my parents on a regular basis, because I'm always like, at what age should you have sent me to private school? I feel that these conversations are a lot more open now. But I think in some cases it's definitely worth it, but in some cases it's definitely not. Because I think a lot of schools, especially Perth is definitely one of them, they get very fixated on like, our school produces the best exam results, right? But I don't think that that's what makes the experience worth it, to be honest, because inherently, first of all, at these independent schools, there's a huge selection bias when you take into account like people, you know, going into the school. There's stringent entrance exams. You've already gotten, like, schools already receive kind of the cream of the crop, as it were.
But you didn't take an entrance exam in year one, did you?
I did take an entrance exam.
At that age?
At that age, yes. There was 30 spots available, and 30 people applying for 2 spots.
Whoa.
Yeah. even in year one, I distinctly.
So there was only 2 year one students.
2 year one. Me and a friend who's now moved to America.
So it's not even a class then. It's just 2 year ones.
Oh no! Sorry. This was entering in year one, because most people enter during nursery, which is kind of at the age of 3.
I see.
And then those people, they don't take an entrance exam, but in year one I had to.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember identifying shapes, kind of doing really basic maths, but that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not as hard as the Oxford
No,
admissions.
no, not nearly as difficult. No.
Oh, cool. So, tell me more about like your social life at school then, because I mean, being in Cambridge at that age, I'm just quite interested. Obviously, I did my degree at Cambridge, and you were mentioning how you saw me at the UL and all that kind of thing. So, I wonder what it's like to be just a kid in Cambridge.
I mean, it's definitely interesting. I mean, you encounter tourists a lot, which can be sometimes good, sometimes bad.
Good for the restaurant.
Great for the restaurant. Yeah, no, absolutely great for the restaurant. But it's definitely a weird experience. But also a good one. Like Cambridge, as I'm sure you know, it's beautiful. There's a lot of greenery. The buildings are beautiful. But in terms of socially, I mean, there's a lot of kind of stigma about how Cambridge has no kind of, people here are just workhorses. There's not a social life. But it's not true. It's just, to be honest, it's a really, really fun place to be around, to be completely honest. It's great.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. So, regarding your own aspirations, as you were mentioning earlier, how you actively didn't want to do Oxbridge, you want to forge your own path. As kids, we always have our own dreams and ambitions, and some people might want to be athletes or astronauts or entrepreneurs or movie stars. And I was wondering, what were some of the phrases that you had gone through as a kid of what you wanted to do?
Wow. I mean, one thing, I had lots of, first of all, I think my first phase was definitely, I want to be a footballer. As every kid in England does, I want to be a footballer, yeah. I realised, realistically, that's not happening. And then I remember a bin man phase as well. Definitely, I remember a bin man phase. I thought that lorries were the coolest things in the world. I was so jealous. I remember looking out the window when the bin men came around. I was like, wow, that is awesome. I still want to ride one of those trucks to this day. They are sick. And then I think as I got older, I was kind of I was really fixated on this is a lot older, but I really got fixated on engineering, because I was I looked up to my dad and I was maybe this is something I'll be good at. And then nowadays it's very different now. I was originally going to apply for engineering, actually, and then I ended up just switching completely. I was this isn't for me. I was doing something to live up to my dad, but it wasn't for me, so I switched completely.
Okay. And who were your favourite football players?
I'm a Manchester United fan, unfortunately. No, we're not having a great season, but anyone who's played or played for United. So.
Yeah. Did you want to be a professional rugby player?
Never. Rugby was one of the sports where I was good at it, but I really didn't enjoy it.
Not hockey?
No, never good enough at hockey.
Did you ever, Cambridge with punting and stuff, did you ever, either punt much yourself or maybe volunteer as one of the guys?
Yeah, I worked for...
Or work, yeah.
I worked for Scudamores. Actually, I think it's the biggest one in Cambridge. And so I'd have 2 jobs. I don't know if any of you guys have visited Cambridge, but it's the people who stand there with billboards trying to convince you to go punt. They earn commission off it, obviously. Yeah. And then also, I was one of the tour guides on the river, and that was a great summer job, to be honest. It was really, really rewarding experience.
And more conversations with people.
Exactly. I think, yeah.
So were you known as someone at school who had, because obviously my first impression of you now is, you called me today, or you messaged me on LinkedIn, we called on Instagram, and then meeting you now, I've only got really positive things to say about the way you conduct yourself, the manners that you show, the thoughtfulness that you show, the gratitude that you have for other people. Were you always known to be a kid of great character and great leadership?
I really don't think so, to be honest. I think I used to be a lot more kind of reserved. I mean, especially kind of, I think a lot of my self-confidence when I was younger was kind of impacted by my weight. And I think when I was younger, I was really kind of in my shell a lot. I didn't really, like, I was still very social. I had a lot of friends, but I was kind of scared to speak out or anything because I was like, I was the fat kid. I was scared of being kind of made fun of or like judged based on that. So I think it's definitely changed a lot nowadays, but when I was younger, I was definitely less kind of outgoing and less confident than I am now.
Yeah. Did you have any like leadership roles? Any like formal or informal responsibilities?
In terms of like large scale leadership roles, the only things I can think of, I was a prefect at school.
Okay.
Prefect at my school.
Well done.
And on my my school scouts group, I was in a leadership position as well. But I mean, apart from that, not in particular. No.
What about your musical journey? I know you started with violin and piano. How far did you take them?
I mean, violin and piano, those are very much my like Zijia side, very much. And yeah, I started them when I was
so
like
legally got rid of the music as well.
Yeah, exactly. But I started those when I was like really young, like 4 or 5, and I stopped playing because of sixth form. I mean, A levels really just kind of killed that passion. But I mean, I got to a decent level.
Decent as in?
I'm currently I was working towards a diploma in both, like a performance diploma in the UK. So that's once you've done your grade 8, you start doing diplomas. But never took the exam in the end, to be completely honest, because just didn't have the time or dedication to keep up with it anymore. But I still enjoy playing the violin and piano. I still do it occasionally in my spare time, just not with formal training like I used to.
Wow, that's very decent level.
It's an okay level.
Oh, okay. See, British people are just so humble. And me getting to Cambridge, like, oh yeah, what are your hobbies? Oh yeah, I play a bit of piano, a bit of violin. Yeah. In my mind, that's like, okay, maybe like just for fun, or maybe like grade 3, grade 2. And it's like, oh yeah, I just did my diploma like at 16. But, nothing too serious.
Yeah, it feels wrong, like talking yourself up. Like I struggled to write that description of you today. So yeah.
Did you do any like orchestras, bands, or was it more just solo with violin and piano?
I did. I've done orchestra since year 3. I've done that's 10 years. Wow. I've been in orchestras all throughout my time in school with violin.
High quality orchestra?
I mean, in terms of school standard, the highest quality they could offer. For a small period in, I think, year 8 or 9, I was part of the National Children's Orchestra East Anglia division. So that's not the proper one where they perform at BBC proms, but it's still like a decent level of orchestra. Wow. And I participated in that for, I think, a year or so, but I didn't really find much interest in it, to be honest.
It's incredible how much you have been able to do with, two musical instruments at such high level, multiple sports at such high level, when for most people, even just having one thing at a high level is quite an achievement. And how were you able to balance and prioritize each of these so that they all reach such a, like, even if it was just one of them, right, like I said, it would have been really impressive, but the fact that you have 5, that it almost doesn't seem like that, I'm just a bit numb, It's like, oh yeah, of course he's professional this, professional that, diploma this.
I mean, I think even nowadays, like, managing everything is really tough. Like, as I said, for A-levels, I kind of stopped doing all these things that I really enjoy, which, maybe I shouldn't have, to be completely honest, but I still try to maintain it, and I think it's more about just sticking to a schedule. I rarely deviate, from I have a set thing of what I'm going to do this week, what I'm going to do today, and I really try.
Tell me more about your schedule. What does that mean?
I mean, nowadays, in terms of staying fit, it's kind of like I go to the gym twice a day. I go in terms of education, I try and keep on top of things. Obviously now the summer, it's got a bit haywire, but I try and I think the best way to describe it is just keeping consistent. Like, I may not be the person who's up until, with all these things you'd maybe think, oh, he's up till 1. No, I'm not ever working till 2, 3 a.m. It's more a case of just getting the stuff done like to a decent quality
Yeah.
when it needs to be, instead of kind of cramming everything to last minute.
Yeah, that's really true, because I did a lot at school as well, and often people are, oh, you know, how much sleep did you get? And in fact, I think when I was doing my best at uni or at school, when I was doing the most, sleep was actually also the most, because you actually just can't function without it. And the misconception people have is that it's a sprint, and when it's actually more of a marathon. So with those activities then, were you able to just go yourself, or did your parents have to drop you off? Because, I mean, Cambridge is a lot of cycling, but where I grew up in Australia, right, there's a lot of, like, driving.
Yeah, my dad was basically like my personal Uber driver in my young years. Luckily nowadays I have a license, so I don't have to rely on him as much anymore. But no, because especially with the sports I used to do, like oftentimes it would be kind of a long travel away. So for example, tennis tournaments would be, you know, in the next city or whatever, and it'd be like, you know, kind of a day trip for us. So yeah, he took a lot of time out of his kind of work to take me to these things, and I was definitely reliant on him for, you know, lifts and car journeys and the sort.
And on those journeys, what were you talking about?
I remember he would, especially because I did a lot of these sports when I was really young, I remember we'd always do times tables in the car. Like that's like a really core memory. Yeah, like really just like teaching me times tables when I was younger. I think when it got older, we started talking about stuff like football. My dad's a really big football fan, surprisingly. But like, we started talking about stuff like sport, general stuff. Sometimes we'd talk about like, I don't know, him growing up in like his life, but that was few and far between. I feel as though I was too young to kind of appreciate where he came from. So.
Okay. So after the tournament, on the trip back, how often did he comment on your performance, and or did he just leave the on-court stuff completely to you, or was he also aware of things, if that makes sense?
He never really cared like if I won or lost. I think I realized like really early on that he didn't care about like how I did or like whether I won or he cared more about my attitude, which like when I was younger I was like, why would you care about my attitude? Like if I won, I won. But now I'm like, he was right. Probably again it's a case of he told me so and he was right. But it was a lot of like if I had, let's say, played a tennis match and I'd gotten really annoyed or like, you know, smacked my racket, he'd be really kind of unhappy.
So it's more the character, the moral side.
Exactly. He was much more interested in like whether I had a good character, whether I was kind of portraying myself as a kind of good person, much more than whether I was, you know, winning or like coming first, getting goals, whatever.
Wow, that's really important, because I see some parents try and push their kids so far about on the court, and I think they miss the point. Is these are experiences of character development, and these are moments where sport is a great metaphor for the inevitable ups and downs and the qualities of life. And I think that's one of the things I appreciate of my parents is, you know, they were very much unfocused on necessarily the results, but more on how I interact with my teammates, whether I was appreciative of my coaches, whether I listened, and just the little things there that I think are very transferable and very helpful. So wow, that's really, really cool to hear. What other things not mentioned in your bio did you try? Because I just feel like you must have some other hidden talents.
In terms of stuff I did.
Or thought about, and you know.
I mean, I guess when I was younger, I had this. I still have it today, actually. I have a very weird thing where I get like really addicted to certain things. So, for example, there was a good like 2-year phase where I got really into magic, like all of these. I don't know. When I was younger, I guess that was one of the quirks I had. I get really into stuff like.
Can you perform any magic tricks?
Oh, if you had a deck of cards, absolutely, I could perform some magic shit. Yeah. It was like when I was younger, I used to kind of really get into random stuff like Pokemon, like all of that stuff. And I get really fixated on stuff for sure. And that's definitely kind of carried over because I was never kind of fixated on school until this year. I got fixated and then like it's all I would kind of think about. And I enjoyed it, which was like the most important part. And I guess kind of reap the benefits now. So yeah.
That's super cool. Wow. So were you... Like, it's just, again, it seems like whatever you do, you're able to do it quite well. are you just quite naturally, quick learner, or whatever you set your mind on, you set a plan and stick to your schedule and really grind it out?
I think in terms of like natural talent for things, I don't think I'm particularly kind of good. Like if I look at kind of people who I'm close with, they're far more kind of naturally talented than me. I think it's more of a case of just I guess I stay consistent, I think. Like most of the time I don't really I think that's it. I just stay consistent, just, grind it out, as you said, just keep on going, like whatever's going on, like don't let.
And who taught you all these time management advice and best practices?
Trial and error throughout the years. I used to be an absolute, like when I was younger, I used to be an absolute mess, like, miss homeworks.
Wow.
Like forget a tennis racket to a tennis tournament, like somehow, like stuff like that. It's amazing, seriously. I remember one time going like an hour drive and not having a racket. I was like, oh my word. And I feel as though, a lot of trial and error, a lot of mistakes throughout the years. And then I guess finally not cracked it, but it's better nowadays. So I don't forget my racket anymore, so that's probably good.
Wow. Okay. That's really interesting. And again, I think, you were asking why I started the podcast, and I think among one of the core reasons is also I just, from my own experience and a deeply held belief, is that we are all very nuanced people, and we all go through transformations, and it's so easy to just look at the achievements that you've had and going to Oxford and instantly just feeling like that you are this superhuman. And obviously you're incredibly impressive, and lots of your efforts are very commendable, but I think you're just like me and just like other people, still human at the end of the day, and we make mistakes and we misjudge things, and we learn and we try and error. And you will continue to make mistakes, I think, in Oxford and going beyond, which I think, that's what I kind of enjoy answering your question about the podcast, is really hearing the journey and the progression, and it's very non-linear. It's not like 100%. Once you remember your tennis racket, you'll never forget it. You might forget it again next month.
The important thing is forgetting it less. It's interesting you mentioned like in your mind, wow, it's impressive, but I've always kind of thought of it in terms of like comparatively to where you start. So what I mean by that is like all of these things, like I always kind of think like, I did them, but I don't think it's particularly I don't think I'm, as you said, superhuman. I completely disagree. I think I'm completely like normal. But I think it's, for example, like I look at my family and like where they've got to, and then like comparatively from where they started to where they've got to, I'm nowhere near, like comparatively to
they've had a bigger delta, bigger
exactly
change,
much bigger
steeper,
delta life than I have. Exactly. So I don't think I've achieved much yet, but hopefully when I grow older, when I get to your age, maybe I'll feel like I'm getting there, but not yet.
Well, if you have their delta from kind of where you are, then that would be pretty high.
I mean it would be, but there's a long way to go to that.
So what does success mean in the household and the family?
Wow, now that's a great question. I think success, I think my perception of success definitely has changed a lot since when I was younger, because I feel as though as many kids, when you're younger, you're like, oh, I want to drive a fast car, I want to have a nice house. I think nowadays stuff like that matters a lot less to me. I think in my eyes, success, I think, is about feeling fulfilled. I don't think it's about how much money you earn, although like that's definitely kind of important in the family to a degree, kind of to repay them back, because morals won't, buy them nice holidays or anything. But I think for me it's about feeling fulfilled, feeling like you're doing something notable with your life. You're doing something that you really care about, you feel passionate about. For example, your passion project, Coffee's on Me. But I think it's about feeling fulfilled and like you've done enough in your life to talk about.
Do you feel fulfilled most times?
Oof. Somewhat, I'd say I definitely wouldn't say like I feel properly fulfilled yet, because I haven't given back to my family yet. So that's a thing that I need to do, which I haven't really, done yet. I feel like satisfied with where I've got to at this point in time, but I definitely wouldn't say that, I've done enough in my life for me to be like, wow, it's been a worthwhile. I haven't done enough to be like, wow, like, we've completed it, we've made it. But hopefully, as the years carry on, one day I'll be like, yeah, we've made it. But not yet.
In your mind, what's the realistic made it? Like, is it you getting into a good company? Is it you starting your own business? Like, is there, like, in your mind, and I'm certain that picture in the mind right now won't be the actual finish point, but right now, what do you think is the most realistic made it moment? What does it sound like? What does it
this
feel
might
like?
sound really weird, but like the one thing in my mind which like I've made it. This might sound very, very strange, but it's actually like watching my kid play football. I know that sounds like completely kind of rogue and out there, but it's like once, or like, shouldn't push football on them. Once I see my kind of kid like doing something they enjoy and be like, wow, like that I think
You've passed it on.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Wow.
something that they really enjoy, they really feel passionate about. I think that's the point. I'll be like, wow, we've made it.
You got a girlfriend?
Not at the moment, no, not at the moment.
Would you date in uni?
Yeah, no, absolutely, 100%. I'd date in uni, yeah.
And what kind of qualities would you be looking for in a potential partner then?
Someone who's who's caring. Definitely I want someone smart. I think like.
That would be hard at Oxford.
Yeah. But someone who I can have like conversations with, and like, intellectual conversations about, like, let's say tougher topics and stuff. But honestly, just someone who cares, I guess. Someone who just, cares enough to like take care of themselves, for example, like cares about doing better, cares about bettering themselves. Just honestly, someone.
Did you date in school?
I did date in school, yeah.
And you still did all those different commitments?
Yeah. It was tough balancing act, yeah.
So did you get your schedule with dating as well?
Oh no, absolutely not. No. A lot of my schedule went out the window to my dating. I'll be completely honest. Yeah, I deviated a lot from it. Like, for example, I basically just stopped going to the gym when like I was dating. I was like, that schedule went out the window. I'll be completely honest with you.
So do you see, like, people have different viewpoints on dating, and especially in a crucial period in terms of, like, say, career development? Like, do you feel like dating has any effect on your own aspirations, or is it complementary perhaps, or is it distracting? Like, what's, or is it just a case by case?
I think I think to an extent it's definitely complementary, especially if you and your partner have like similar goals in mind. So like, as you mentioned earlier, like, what would I look for in a partner? I definitely want someone with similar goals, because it's a lot easier to kind of develop that relationship, right? If you have similar outlooks on life, similar things that you're aiming for. And in that sense, it's definitely complementary. I mean, obviously, if you pick someone who kind of where they're going in life doesn't align with you, then that could be more kind of clashing, or like clashy sort of thing. But yeah, I think it really depends on what type of person you are and what type of partner you find, I guess.
So what are your goals then?
My goals?
What direction are you heading? What's your North Star?
North Star. I mean, it's really early days right now, but hopefully, in 3 years' time, end up in a somewhat similar situation, somewhat similar position as you, working.
You can aim higher, you can aim better.
You're in a pretty impressive position at the moment, to be honest. But I mean, yeah, end up somewhere like here. I mean, that's the short term, and then hopefully just kind of retire early enough to have, like, enough energy to really live life, like, properly.
How much money do we need to retire?
Wow. Giving a lump sum figure is really difficult, because, like, 1 million now isn't going to be worth the same in come 20 years. So I guess that is a really tough question. enough that you don't need to ever worry about stuff. Like, I would never retire if I wasn't in a position where I was like, I will be financially comfortable. Me and my family will be financially comfortable for the rest of our lives. I really don't think I could give you a number. That's such a tough question.
But that's a goal that you have in mind.
Definitely financial freedom, for sure.
Okay. And do you think a corporate job will give you that?
That I don't know. I mean, I'm still very undecided on like what direction I want to go after uni. Like, I'm really kind of debating on what to do in terms of like finding work after uni. And yeah, I guess that's really tough to say. I definitely want to, you know, instead of corporate owning my own business at some point, but you know, I'm 18. It's still way down kind of my timeline.
So what is your parents like, for them to have gone through the path that they've gone through, being quite entrepreneurial, owning their business? What have they suggested you in terms of balancing the career, financial needs, and the kind of more personal fulfillment? Like, what advice did they give you in how to live career-wise?
I feel as though they've always said just like follow where your passion lies, really. I think they were always just like, in order to find fulfillment, in order to kind of find that purpose, you know, to what you're doing, it's just follow your passion.
But was their passion really dishwashing?
It wasn't, but yeah, fair enough. But I think that they realised that dishwashing, that was on the path to getting to where they wanted to be. That was on the road to achieving their kind of passion, or like achieving their kind of thing that they love to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they believe that you don't get to a good goal or a good destination straight away.
Yeah.
There are
You have
places
to do things that are uncomfortable, or like you don't maybe enjoy doing as much as your passions to get to where you want to.
Okay.
I think that's what they really pushed, yeah.
Right. And you're looking forward to the grind? You think there will be years of hard work?
Looking forward to it is a stretch, but I'm definitely ready for it. I've accepted I know what I've gotten myself into. I know that it's going to be a tough kind of couple of years, but I'm ready for it, hopefully. Maybe I'll be saying differently in a year's time.
What do you want out of Oxford as a uni experience?
I mean, out of Oxford specifically, just to, you know, meet people who I guess I connect with. I'm really excited to join, like, you know, sports societies. That I'm really looking forward to. Kind of just, you know, make friends for life, I guess. Like, I already have, you know, I have really good friends, you know, at school, but I feel as though meeting people maybe from similar walks of life as you, to, you know, make friends for life, I guess.
And any fears of Oxford?
Absolutely. I mean, it's the people there. I guess I'm scared of, like, not being good enough, I guess. Like, everyone there is so impressive, you know. I've spoken to a few people who, you know, maybe I've interacted with people going to my college or doing my course, and they all seem to have, you know, incredibly impressive resumes. I'm like, sometimes I guess I doubt myself, thinking like, am I good enough to do this? Like, you know, can I do this? And, you know, yeah, we'll have to see, I guess.
That's really cool. I guess in the context of, you know, giving you a legacy-worthy interview, you know, just a snapshot of where you are now, and hopefully you look back in 5, 10, 20 years time when you're watching your kids play football, you'll put it on this podcast and go, oh my God, I thought that. And hopefully you find great meaning in the delta that you have managed to achieve. But is there anything else that you want to put in this recording, or else I've got some just to wrap up?
Anything else I want to put in this recording? I guess, you know, one thing I'd want to say to my younger self, I guess, is just don't be afraid of what other people think of you. I think that's definitely a large part of, like, growing up. I was really scared of what people thought of me, and I've realized now that it's just a waste of energy and time. I think that's, you know, my main message to my younger self, people out there, just don't care too much about what other people think of you, and just do it. Like, for example, when you mentioned earlier, you're worried about about yourself being a meme, you know, after starting the podcast. I mean, this clearly shows that, you know, it was a good idea, and people, you should just do it. Do what feels right. Yes.
And yeah, that's indeed the key. Do what feels right. And yeah, really interesting message to self. So I guess just a quick round of rapid fire questions, just to spice it up a bit, and then we'll finish on two of the bigger ones. But what's your favorite dish in your parents' restaurant?
My parents' restaurant, sweet and sour chicken, absolutely. I know it's not authentic Chinese, I know, but I've been westernized to an extent, I guess. So yeah.
You're about to start applications. If you could get into any company for your first year internship, what company and what role?
BlackRock, hopefully, and then role. I don't know enough about the finance.
Not Blackstone, BlackRock.
BlackRock. Yes.
Okay.
BlackRock.
Cool. So they're asset manager.
Mm-hmm. Asset management group. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. If you could do another sport, what would it be?
You know, I'm really upset I never picked up basketball. Like,
You should
truly,
be. You really missed out.
I actually, I completely agree. I think basketball was the one I really missed out on.
Which countries have you been to?
I travel a lot. Used to travel like a lot. China, Japan, a lot of Europe. So just France, Spain, Greece.
For family holidays, or?
Yeah, because one of the parents always used to have to watch the restaurant, so they'd kind of take turns taking me to places, and like
just to give you exposure.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was just to like see the world and like see what's out there.
They've really invested. They've
put
this master plan.
I know. Yeah, I know. Yeah, they've invested a lot, and I'm eternally grateful for them for it. But yeah, they've really put a lot into me.
Wow. Is your bed made at the moment? Like, are you organised?
I think my bed. I made my bed this morning. Yeah. I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's your favourite board game?
Ooh. Bit of a Monopoly man myself, to be honest. Yeah.
What's the dumbest dare that you've ever agreed to?
Wow. Okay. Dumbest dare. Probably getting a buzz cut. Yeah, probably that, to be completely honest. I really underestimated how long it would take to grow out, so yeah.
One or two role models?
My dad, of course, definitely one. Another, there's this guy actually he kind of mentored me through the kind of application process. He's a man called Mo, and he currently he lives in Cambridge, and he really kind of helped me throughout the process.
Wow, that's cool. What about celebrity-wise? Who have you found to be particularly inspiring or pretty cool?
I mean, as a United fan, I think I'm slightly biased towards Rashford. I mean, what he's done for kind of underprivileged kids or kids who may not have been given the same opportunities, it's amazing, to be honest. Yeah, I guess celebrity-wise, it'd have to be Rashford.
Okay. Final rapid-fire question, finish the sentence. The way to my heart is...
Food. Yeah.
Lots of people say food.
No, 100% food.
There's just something about food that unites everyone.
If a girl cooked for me, I'd fall for them instantly. Absolutely. Not a question about it.
I guess second to last question, just a chance to, or maybe third to last, depending on what you say, but just a chance for you to, again, properly recognise the people. I know you speak Chinese, and so I was wondering, could you maybe divvy up some thanks in Mandarin and Chinese to people who've meant a lot to you, and how you divvy it up depends on you, but let's capture
in Mandarin,
Chinese and English, so that we capture your language skills and gratitude at the same time.
我要跟我的妈妈说谢谢，和我的爸爸说谢谢，把我放这么好一个学校。我要跟我的爷爷和奶奶说谢谢。我在中国说，我原来我的奶奶是个数学老师， 我小的时候他帮助了我很多学数学。In English, I'd like to thank my friends first and foremost. My friends are everything in my life. Like they mean everything to me. Like keeping you going when it's just like, school is just kind of too much. And I want to thank my teachers for, I'm not very good at believing in myself, and my teachers always believed in me. So, yeah, I guess that's about it. Sorry, I know the Mandarin was very broken up because my Mandarin is not up to scratch.
Maybe actually second to last question, second to last. What are your, where do you currently sit on religion, on spirituality, on kind of the spiritual world, and what's not immediately seen? Like, does it exist? Does God exist? Are religions real? Are they just stories? Or what's your general thoughts on?
In the last year, it's actually changed a lot. So I used to be really atheist, right? I used to be really there's no God. Everything can be explained by physics and science. And nowadays, I'm a lot more on the fence. So I think in terms of the belief of God, I'm still very much doubtful. But I'd say in terms of living by the values, I think I definitely try and live by the values more. I've started attending, I go to church now.
Which church?
I think it's called St. Andrew's. It's the one...
Oh, Stag. St. Andrew's.
Yeah, Stag. Yeah, Stag. That's it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good service, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great service. The pastor's really good. Pastor, sorry, not pastor. But yeah, no, I think living by the values, I'd say, is the one that I really kind of resonates with me. In terms of existence of God, that's I'm a bit more kind of on the fence, but I really try and live by the values that kind of are preached, I guess, by Christianity in this case.
Interesting. Final question then, I guess, with all the context of what you have been through, being born in Birmingham, moving to Coventry, moving to Cambridge, but with the backdrop of all that of your parents, growing up in the Mao era in China, being relatively accomplished at that period of gaining, dad with his master's degree in engineering, mum with economics and working in banking there, for them to decide to move country so that you could have a better life, and for them to almost delay, not delay, I don't know about it, but having a child at a relatively older age, at about 40, for them to make that decision of what they believe offers the most holistic and the most the most kind of, I don't know the right word, but just a place where academics perhaps is less of a role and you get more of a chance to do your rugby, your hockey, your your music and your other kind of pursuits in that kind of environment, for you to have tried out a bunch of different things, like even taking up magic, for example, for you to socialize and go through tough periods such as with fitting in, with the name change and just family doing whatever they can to help you, for them to take you around the world just so you can have that exposure of the big wide world, the long drives to extracurricular activities even when you forget your tennis racket, for you to be a part of the restaurant and to see how difficult it actually is to make a living and to maintain that hospitality business, and to see mum and dad model that client service and to welcome guests like Stephen Hawking, for example, and it's just particularly cool. But for them to, I guess, at every moment put you in the best opportunity for you to develop your skills, and even at the restaurant for you to speak to all those different people, for you to go through a private school basically throughout your life, a really, really good private independent schools with lots of opportunities, for you to actively be against going to Oxbridge due to the elitist perceptions and wanting to forge your own path, and but then going through that turning point of realizing that even though it isn't necessarily objectively better, there is still a point in the guidance that your school and your family have promoted and trying to steer you on, and to humble yourselves to realize that sometimes we can change our mind and we perhaps should change our mind, to think about your future, wanting to be financially independent, wanting to make a difference, and perhaps to watch your kids play football or some other sports. With all of those backdrop and context in mind, what are questions, like, I mean, big questions, not just like, what am I going to do on Freshers Week, but what are like the big questions that you think you actively want to address in the short, medium, and long term?
Big questions. Wow. I think in the long term, I definitely want to address, like, definitely from a cultural standpoint, like who I am, like in China, because I feel as though growing up I definitely suppressed a lot of that growing up, and like unfortunately my grandparents, you know, aren't around to tell me about all of that anymore, but I think that's the really big one, like getting a sense of like my Chinese identity, right? Because I think we can both accept that although I was born in Britain, I still have Chinese blood in me. My family's still, my entire heritage is still Chinese. I think definitely, in the long term, that's definitely the main goal, to really like kind of connect with my Chinese self and my Chinese culture and my family in China, who I need to see more, to be honest. Short to medium term is much more difficult. I guess just, I don't really, short to medium term, wow, that should be easier, but it's really not. I guess just in terms of answering, like what question would I have for the short and medium term that I want answering? Possibly, you know, whether all the kind of stuff, whether uni's worth it. I think.
Wow, you're still wondering whether uni's worth it?
Yeah, 100%. I still wonder. I'm very happy.
Worth it in terms of,
like, worth the countless hours kind of sat in the library, worth the countless hours kind of like sat behind a computer screen.
So do you think knowledge has intrinsic value, or is it just a medium to means to an end of achieving financial stability, or does the hours sat in the library of developing your intellectual mind just worth it by itself?
Oh, for its own sake? It's absolutely worth it, like, in itself. I think the question's more of like, I think the question's more along the lines of like, would it be worth taking a different path at some point and spending more time on something? Absolutely, knowledge is intrinsically kind of worth value. Like, even just learning stuff which doesn't, let's say, like, relate directly, I find that incredibly rewarding. But it's more a case of, you know, should I have gone into, for example, the trades as a trading school or something, like, you know, like, I don't know,
vocational education.
Yeah, exactly. More vocational training, more hands-on training. Like,
that's one of my essays.
Really?
Yeah.
Being like, yeah, I think.
What trades would you do then?
Oh, I chose the uni path, so I've never really put thought into it. I think it's more of a case of like questioning.
But did you seriously put forward the option to your parents?
I think before sixth form I was seriously considering, like, you know, this was a time when I wasn't really academically kind of good, to say the least. So I was really considering, I think that was the time where kind of degree apprenticeships were on the rise as well. You know, stuff like where you're kind of more in a hands-on environment, maybe it's less kind of academically taxing, or like, you know, go to, as I said, vocational training. I was seriously considering, like, maybe this is what I'm cut out for, maybe school isn't for me, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool. Maybe just I know I did say last question, but I'm just going to add one more of the typical last one, just given the backdrop of that. But
of course,
like, with that context as well, of the different path and the roads not taken and everything, what's like one message, quote, or saying you wish that every educator, parent, leader, coach would promote and every child would internalize? A universal message that doesn't really depend on the individual person that you would want your kids playing football to really
To
know and
really
understand. Yeah.
education specific or just life
Just
specific?
life, yeah, your life philosophy, your outlook that you think is objectively capital T truth.
Worry less.
Don't
Really.
worry, be happy.
Don't worry, be happy. I mean, yeah, I think,
When you worry, the trouble's double.
yeah, exactly. Just don't worry. Just everything will, hopefully, like, I think in most cases, everything will work out. So just worry less. I think I definitely worry too much, and I wish I worried less. And I really hope that my kids don't worry as much as I do. Yeah, I think
Great.
that's
Well,
about it.
Austin, or Zijia, thank you for, thanks for messaging me, and thanks for
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
calling and for coming down from Cambridge to
Of
London.
course.
And it's almost 10 p.m. now. It's getting very dark here. But a really great conversation, and I think it's
pleasure.
particularly humbling for me to sense your gratitude and appreciation for family, and it makes me, and on a weekend like this, when I'm not in the best kind of state, almost a bit even like simultaneously guilty that I am not more appreciative of the blessings I have, and I haven't always made the most out of all the things that my family, friends, community have given and entrusted on me. But at the same time, I feel so hopeful that, that I'm so grateful that, the examples of other people that they've said that I can and I will, be more inspired and motivated, and to be able to make better decisions at times. And I just think the way that you're able to connect the dots and to really look ahead with such optimism and enthusiasm and whatever you take up is just particularly thought-provoking, and I'll definitely be taking that going forward, and I wish you the best as you start your journey at Oxford.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, David.